Good morning and welcome to the 2021 Missouri A&OER Symposium. This is the 10:30 session presentation, OER, Can It Be an Education Equalizer? My name is Scott Curtis and I will be your session moderator. The presentation is authored by Neelam, Bharti, and Ethan Pullman. Ethan, who unfortunately won't be joining us today due to a family emergency, is a senior librarian, library instruction coordinator at Carnegie Mellon University. Dr. Neelam Bharti is an MLIS student at University of Missouri and serves as a liaison librarian to the chemical sciences, chemical engineering, and material science and engineering departments at the Carnegie Mellon University libraries. Neelam is actively engaged in library management, teaching information literacy, and research strategy. Her research interest involves OER and open access use in future library strategy. A few logistical items. Live captioning is available during this presentation. Please find the link located under the Handouts tab. I will also make a link to the live captioning available in the discussion forum, which I've just done. This session will be recorded and provided within this event portal in this session following the symposium. As a reminder, all attendees should keep their login credentials to have access to all the conference materials in the portal for 6 months. A copy of the PowerPoint presentation will be made available under the Handouts tab at some point after this presentation. You may enter your questions in the discussion chat or the live Q&A windows. Neelam will be addressing questions at the end of her talk, and we will do our best to answer them all at the end. If you have any technical issues, the MEC staff are behind the scenes to provide support. Be sure to reach out through the live support button. And now I turn it over to our speaker, Dr. Bharti.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for the kind introduction. And welcome, everybody. Our presentation today is focused on OER and how can OER be used as an education access equalizer. As Scott introduced, my name is Neelam, and I'm a student at the University of Missouri. And my co-presenter, Mr. Pullman, he couldn't be here, but he is a big promoter of OER, and he curates OER at the Carnegie Mellon. So we will make it more like a discussion-based. You can post the questions, and I'll be able to answer to those questions. And at the end of this presentation, I am going to put a slide with some questions up there, and would love to know your feedback. You can type it, or if you want to come and speak on the stage, please indicate your interest, and we will put you on the stage so that we can talk to you directly, or you can address us directly. So learning objective for this session are, let's first start with defining the terms. What are open educational resources? And this is the term you are going to hear again and again during this, and hopefully during the whole conference. And I do feel like you will attend the whole conference. That's a great conference, so please do attend. And the second objective is learning, second term we will learn more about is what is diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how we can articulate research-based practices that serve to promote DEI through OER. I will share some of my own experience, and I will share my OER perception study I have done a couple of years ago at University of Florida. And of course, I will include some of the reason why libraries should promote DEI through OER-friendly resources such as Creative Commons. So what is OER, or Open Educational Resource? According to Hewlett Foundation, they have a really great definition of OER, I would say. So OER are teaching and learning and research resources that reside in public domain or have been released under an intellectual property license that permit their free use and repurposing by others. So OER can include full courses, course material, modules, textbook, streaming videos, tests, software, quizzes, or any other tool or material or technique used to support access to knowledge. So any resource that can be attributed as OER, if it can be retained, reused, revised, remix, and redistribute. It could be any resource which is available open access. But when we talk about open access, there is a kind of little confusion among what is open access and what are OER. So OER are open access, but not all open access can be said as OER. Open access is more common for research material, and let's see what is the difference between these two. So open access is mainly digital material that is free of charge, but it may have, it's of course available free of charge, but it may have some licensing restrictions. People can find open access material in archive or repository. That content is made freely available through them, but it may be peer-reviewed or may not be peer-reviewed. One point to notice here is that open access have different colors, like green open access, gold open access, diamond open access, and platinum open access. So most material you see through the archives and repositories, they are green open access and submitted there by the authors or by the creators. Open access journal provider, they provide peer-reviewed articles that's freely available, but generally those articles are paid by the author in some form or by the author's institute or libraries. Whereas open educational resources, they of course include variation of material, and most of that material is available in digital and some in other collectible forms, or if you say that there's a digital copy of a book, you can download it and still use it as open access, as an open educational resource. It ranges from textbook, curricula, lecture notes, games, other educational materials, including assignments and quizzes. MOOCs and other types of freely available courseware or software are a great resources available for open educational resources community. Diversity and equity, it has a very, I would say, personal or individual definition for everybody. In broad term, diversity is any dimension that can be used to differentiate group and or people from one another. It means respect for an appreciation for differences. But it's more than that. We all bring with us a diverse perspective, work experience, lifestyle, and culture. Diversity is defined by who we are as individuals. Its strength comes from the dedication, experience, talent, and the perspective of individual. Diversity encompasses the range of similarities and differences each individual bring to the community. It includes, but not limited to, national origin, language, race, color, disability, ethnicity, gender, religion, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, or veteran status, or even family structure. So I call that diversity is a mix. What is equity? We can define equity as a state or quality or idea of being just, impartial, and fair. The concept of equity is synonymous with fairness and justice. So it is helpful to think that equity is not simply a desired state of affair or value. It can be achieved by sustained equity needs and by structural and systemic concept. When we talk about systemic concept, we can say systemic equity is kind of the basic term for that. And it's a complex combination of interrelated elements consciously designed to create, support, and sustain social justice. And it is a dynamic process that reinforces and replicate equitable ideas, power, resources, strategies, conditions, habit, and outcomes. So diversity is a mix. Equity is a fair chance in a mix. But in inclusion, it's a state of being valued, respected, supported. It's being focusing on the needs of every individual and ensuring the right conditions are in place for each person to achieve his or her full potential. Inclusion should be reflected in the organization's culture, practices, relationships that are in place to support the society. Inclusion is a process of creating a culture and environment that recognize, appreciate, and effectively utilize the talent, skills, and perspective of every member. And it encourages everyone to feel valued for their unique qualities and experience as a sense of belonging. So in very small, I would say, sentences or terms, I would qualify diversity as a mix, equity as a fair chance in the mix, and inclusion as getting to the mix to work together. So when we talk about access to something, no matter what we are talking, what it means? It means to be able to reach, to approach, to contact, or to have access to that material. Access is not equity. Access is just access. So to find out more what equity means in terms of OER, it could be that most OER authors belong to one race. So we need to move in a diverse direction and should encourage people to create OER from a diverse community, a diverse perspective. Or not having enough resources in different disciplines. So then comes the diversity again. If it seems like OER is focused on very few disciplines. So we need to include more discipline in that conversation, in that creation. People do not have equitable access to the OER because of socioeconomic factors, the perceptual reasoning, the digital divide, which is a big reason for inequality, because most of the OER resources are digital, and if we have a digital divide, or if the sector of society does not have access to the Wi-Fi or broadband, then there is no equality. It's a equity and access problem. That include resources awareness, cultural background, language barrier, or even location. So there are too many things to put together in one single frame about this. And we certainly can touch a few of them in this presentation. In terms of educational material, OER creation is overwhelmingly one race, whereas users are not from one race only. Users are the diverse from all over the world. And one of the most common OER resources, OpenStack. Recently, they published data about diversity across all positions at OpenStack, which is, you can see on the slide that about 65% in there are from white race, and then we have 9% Hispanic, and multiple races are only 3.9. Asian and Black or African American have a similar representation there. Just for the reference, OpenStax is a part of Rice University. It is a nonprofit organization. They publish high-quality free textbook, develop innovative courseware, and conduct cutting-edge research in the science of learning. Their team supports students, educators, and institutions by providing effective and affordable educational materials and tools. In Factor 2, when we look at the publication and not at the management part, you will see most of the publications, especially the research publications, are behind the subscription wall. So there, again, we have access problem, people who do not have enough resources, financial resources to access these articles. They are staying out of the access. They cannot reach to these. So this is the problem of access and equity. There are only a small percentage of articles which is available open access, which are open to everyone. But as I said, every open access material, it is bound with the terms and conditions. I will touch base on those terms and conditions later on in this presentation. So access problem, or problem with access to education. In our education system, our student force is getting more diverse. In 1979, only 42% students were diverse in terms of race. But when we reached to year 2000, the diversity among students, undergrad students, was 54%. So the gender, this diversity is increasing day by day, but we still do not have that kind of diversity in our resources or access. If we look at the aspect from global perspective, people don't have equal access to educational resources because of poverty. The situation gets worse with the race and the gender discrimination and physical limitations. Education should be available to everyone, a good education. And most affected area by these discriminations are Central and East Asia, where there are not many resources to access quality educational material. OER doesn't discriminate who is accessing it. And that's why we all need to promote it. It's available to everyone. So in that sense, it may serve as an equalizer. As a librarian, I think we are our best positioned to help in curating, marketing, helping our instructors and our student and our community in finding these resources. So who is missing from this conversation? We are talking about the diversity, we are talking about the access, but it's we, who we are missing in this conversation. Marginalized communities, not only at home, but they are missing globally. From a recent report, open textbooks are used in 120 countries, and almost 4 million students use those. They are left out in this conversation. They just use, but they have no say in how they should be created. People who are discriminated based on social, physical, economic, and cultural dimensions, they all need to be included in OER conversation. What is needed to solve this? The only way is promoting and implementing DEI as a part of planning, publishing, marketing, distribution, engagement, and access to OER. So I'm going to pose some questions to you as you are either work at a library or instructor or is a student in any department, any discipline. These questions are for you all. And I will put this slide back at the very end so that you can share your thoughts about these. So when we talk about OER and diversity, the questions are, do your resources serve diverse community? Whatever resources you have at this moment. Do your resources serve diverse learning needs? Do your resources have accessible design? Are they accessible to everyone? For equity, do your resources support access equally across sub-community? Do your resources receive equal outreach efforts? And do your resources represent the voices of your community? Do your resources include your community participation? These are the questions we have to answer collectively, and then we'll make a good case how we can infuse DEI into OER. So the question always comes in where to start, what to do, and how to take this further from here. One point I would say that Creative Commons can be a good starting point. We can use Creative Commons to promote DEI through OER and other friendly resources. What is Creative Commons? And how we can use it to promote DEI in OER? So Creative Commons licensing is the terms of licensing which can be used by an author or a creator to share their material, and there are different terms and conditions for these Creative Commons licensing terms. If a material is available in public domain, that means it's freely available to do anything, use in any ways anybody likes. If it has a 0 Creative Commons licensing, then also it says the same thing. You can use it, change it, make derivative, use it for commercial purpose, do whatever you want to do with it. So these are called the open, real open, or absolute open material. Excuse me. Then other licenses such as CC-BY, CC-BY-SA, CC-BY-ND, CC-BY-NC, CC-BY-NCA-SA, and CC-BY-NC-ND. All these 6 licenses, they require author attribution or creator attribution, or whoever had the copyright to these material. Among all these 6, the least restrictive is the CC-BY, and then it becomes more restrictive, and the most restricted is CC-BY and CND. So in a little brief, CC-BY is where you can use the work, do whatever you like with it, as long as you give attribution to the creator or the copyright holder. CC-BY-SA, if you add to or change the work, you must share it with the same BY-SA license. BY-ND, you can use the work as long as you don't change it in any way. That means no derivatives. CC-BY-NC, you can use the work and add to it or change it, but you can't make money from it. So you cannot use it for commercial purpose. CC-BY and CSA, if you change the work, you must share it with the same license, and you can't make money out of it. And CC-BY-ND, you can use and share the work, but you cannot change it or sell it or make money out of it. So these are the licenses called Creative Commons license. And we can use these when we create something as an author, or if we have a copyright to something, we can use Creative Commons to make those material more open. And I would say if we really want to, CC-BY is the least restrictive, at least use this one. So before we start talking and going on this journey to find answer how to include the DEI or promote DEI using OER. Let's have a look at the textbook price, because textbooks are the other expense with the college tuition, where students really pay a huge price. Customer price index for the selected goods show a constant price hike in textbook price, whopping 160% from 2000 to 2018. And it's only third to the hospital cost and the college cost among most common expenses. Average new textbook cost went from 57 to 79 in 2013, and I'm sure after 80 years of 2013, today it's much higher. According to a survey by National Association of College Stores, a study by Higher Education, students spend on an average $415 each on required course material. It's a lot of money for a student. But we saw a drop in textbook spending after 2018. It was not that the textbooks were getting cheaper. So what was the reason? The reason came out that the students were not buying many textbooks, but they moved towards renting because renting was much cheaper. So availability of rental book services it's great, but it does not solve our problem. Why? As Nicole Allen, Director of Open Education at the Scholarly Publishing and Academic Resources Coalition, said that decreasing spending on the college textbook is not a good sign. It could mean that students are not buying enough textbooks, and it may impact their learning outcomes. So was Allen actually right? Well, we will get to know about that in our next slide. So Florida Virtual Campus, they did a study in 2016 about the textbook and course material. And they were studying the impact of textbook cost on students. And as Ellen pointed out to start with, that it may not be a good sign in terms of student learning. You can see more than 50% of respondents admitted to failing a course or reported poor grades because of their inability to afford a textbook. 2/3 of them said they don't purchase the required textbook. And this was exactly what experts have been saying on textbook expense decline, that it is not a good thing. It's going to impact our students and their learning in a negative way. So research shows clearly that textbook costs impacted student learning and final grades and course outcome. How we can apply this data to bring more equity? This can be assisted by approaching OER as a solution. If instructors are aware that due to the high cost, students are unable to buy the textbook, and there are other options available which are equally good, then I anticipate more instructors would be open to including OER in their curriculum. As the University of Texas at Arlington did, their open education librarian, Michelle Reed, she reached out, she worked collaboratively with the instructor and finally led a project creating a series of video promoting textbook heroes. And who were cited in those videos? The professor who have replaced commercial textbook in their courses with the OER. So to promote equity through OER, we need to assess the environment. But faculty think about the OER. Do they know about these resources? Are they aware where they can find these resources? Do they have any concern if somebody can help them? And to answer all these questions, we need to do an assessment survey on our campuses. because every campus has a different need. Every campus has a different environment. I did a perception study at University of Florida about the perception of OER among faculty and students and how they use the OER. Let's see what the survey said. So the survey was done among 4 colleges, STEM colleges, and the participants were faculty, students, and staff scientists involved in research. We had 176 responses from the campus. The question asked that what material they use in instructions. Most of them said they do not really include different things in instructions from OER, but there was a good chunk of students and faculties who said they use OER as a supplemental reading and heavily included classroom assignments also using OER. Some even used OER as a course reserve. That was something new for even to me to learn, that our faculty were so proactive that they were using OER as course reserve. And some replaced their textbook with the OER textbook. So that was very encouraging to find out. Then we asked the other question in the same survey, that what material they use in research. And that was interesting to learn that open access article was the most used open resource they have used. And then comes the open software, where they were pretty popular among the researchers. Textbooks was also used among the researcher for this exact purpose. So the point was we were trying to understand the instruction and research need and the use of OER and awareness of OER among our faculty. And we were pleasantly surprised because this was not what we were aware of. Other one, we went back and asked the question of reason why they were using OER. And we were surprised to learn about the reason as well. So cost effectiveness, which we would have anticipated. Cost effectiveness was one reason, but the point where we were a little skeptical that a faculty or student may not find the quality of the content comparable to the textbook, we found at least 24 faculty and about 33 students found that the quality of the content was equal to the regular textbook they get. So it was, and the other point they made that it was easily updated or revised, so they could modify the content according to their own needs. So it was a great way to learn the reasons why they wanted to use or why they were using the OER. Then finally, we wanted to understand what are the barriers in OER where we could support them as a library to kind of help in getting more into OER and providing the open resources to students. And the two biggest reasons that came up were unfamiliarity with OER subject content and the lack of time to review OER. These were the 2 points where we felt that libraries could help in that. And so we found that opportunity in here, how we can use this to improve or to make OER more accessible. So there are there are opportunities to make impact, as I said. And a recent report from OpenStack said during the pandemic, the demand for the books has doubled. And since 2012, $1.2 billion have been saved in education cost, and that's mostly in textbook cost. 4 million students from 120 countries uses OpenStax. So these are the reason enough to reach out to the diverse community and to be an active partner in OER. 60% of higher educational institutes in US now use OpenStax textbook. 4,000 K-12 schools using OpenStax. And most impactful is the diversity through OpenStax, the user diversity, the spectrum of users who are involved in using OER. So what is the opportunity here for us as a librarian, as an instructor, as a student, what to do? So limitations, I would say, and then I will kind of tag along that with the library's role. It's a common saying that people don't know what they don't know. And that could be true for anybody. As a librarian, as an instructor, as a student, that's true. We don't know what we don't know. So in my survey, as you can see, not knowing what are the options is probably the biggest hindrance in using open access or open educational resources. So what we can do as a librarian, we can curate a diverse OER based on the campus need. But for that, first we need to go back to our campuses and ask our instructors, our students, how we can help. What are the resources they are currently using and how we can adopt OER resources instead of those. Where to find OER? That's the biggest question. Well, we need to be kind of their eyes and ears in that. And making OER collection, curating OER collection, making it available through library catalog is how we can promote equity and diversity in OER use. And how to choose? Who can help? Faculty and students and the users always have that question. Well, certainly partnering with instructors to promote DEI in OER. It's not only for use, but we can encourage the diverse community, diverse instructors and the creators to be partner in OER. And the other one, since most OER are digital, so we really need a movement to make them more accessible. We need to focus on the digital divide. That's probably the greatest barrier in accessing OER for the diversity, equity, and inclusion. So these are a couple of things we can play a huge role in promoting OER in diversity, equity, and inclusion. So diversity, in a sense, as West put it together, in OER sense, it can be introduced when we curate and we remix and revise resources into our courses. One term I specifically want to use for this purpose is McDonaldization. I am not sure if you have heard this. It was used by the George Ritter. So what McDonaldization means is, this is when a society adopts the characteristic of a fast food restaurant by providing a customer with instant gratification. That means your waiting time is less than 5 minutes to get a burger. And that is what OER has done for our educational system. With OER adoption, students have their textbook and faculty are able to teach instantaneously. They do not have to wait for the library acquisition or for themselves to reach out to a book publisher or a distributor and wait for a week or two to get that book and then think about how they can provide that book to the student. All that is taken care in McDonaldization. So this removes barrier to access, thus contributing to equitable outcome. But in order to achieve equity in our education system, we will also need help from our technological agencies with hardware, computer, tablets, phone, and most importantly, Wi-Fi or broadband. OER plus technologies and professional development advances us towards an equitable educational system. So with this, I will leave it to you to think about it and bring those questions back. What you feel about these? Do you have any feedback or any idea to address these questions? And I'll be happy to kind of respond to any questions you may have at this point.
Thank you, Dr. Bharti. This is Scott Curtis again, the moderator. And if you do have questions or would like to engage in a dialogue with Dr. Bharti about the presentation or about these questions, please raise your hand and we will then recognize you and get you in contact with her right now. So. One of the things I thought was interesting, Dr. Bharti, was looking at the OpenStax resources that you brought up and the point you were making about being able to modify them to include examples, exercises, things related to your local community needs, and being able to address DEI through that.
Yes, and that's been my experience when I was doing that survey. With the survey, we had kind of discussions with the faculty and learn about that their main concern was how they can use these resources or customize those for the student learning, diverse student learning, because at the University of Florida, we had at that time almost 50,000 students on campus, and then we had remote campuses. So they've been doing remote education for past 10, 15 years, and we had students on other campuses taking class live from Gainesville campus. And those were the concerns, like if we have a book in course reserve as a physical book in the libraries, those students cannot access those books. So we need to find some resources or some ways so that all students get access to the book in a similar way. Nobody have to worry about how I am going to get access to that specific book, what the instructor is using. And that's how some of those actually adapted OER or open textbook, so that student, no matter they were in Gainesville campus or they were at St. Pete or anywhere else, they would be able to see that material right away wherever they were in an equitable manner.
As a librarian interested in getting more DEI into OER at a university, do you suggest that we reach out to faculty in our community to include the voices that are not normally represented by OERs at this time, or do we just put out a general call? Should we be more targeted about who we're trying, whose voices and which faculty members we're trying to reach with our message?
That's a great point. And yes, we can send out a general call and use other traditional ways to kind of include the diverse voices. But with my experience, I was fortunate enough to be a part of a group called Human Library at UF. And at that time, I was learning about OER and I was involved in Human Library, and it kind of clicked. And I thought, we are working with the local community from a very diverse ethnic, cultural, social background, diversity. And we started engaging in a discussion with them that why don't you share your experience, and whatever you write or create, make it openly available so that it is easily available to everybody. So that was one way to include the diverse community to become a creator or be a voice in OER.
Are there any more questions from our attendees? We have not seen any others at this point. Just give it another couple of seconds.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much for attending this session. Please provide your feedback on this session through a short 3-question survey that will pop up for you at the end of the session. The next session is at 1 o'clock. Felicity Dicus and Heather Mulason-Sandy of University of Missouri will be presenting Developing an OER Textbook, the Fun, the Frustrations, and the Progress. During this break, we encourage you to check out the Meeting Hub and connect with other attendees. To leave this session, you can click the Back to Timeline link on the top left-hand corner of the portal. Thank you very much. Again, thank you to Dr. Bharti for a really good presentation, very enjoyable and informative, and everybody have a great day.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.